This is Ryan Cantor. Before we turn our attention completely and solely to college football and Clemson football, I wanted to give a final video on Clemson basketball, kind of wrap the season and do a bit of a look ahead. The next probably 6 months of videos will be Clemson football pretty exclusively. So if that's what you're interested in, definitely please subscribe. We'll be coming out with a ton of spring football content, preseason content, and then, of course, during the year. But one last kind of wrap up on what was a up, well, more of a down and then up and then back down Clemson basketball season, and then we'll look ahead. So Clemson basketball, by the record, was a good year. 23-11, third in the ACC. They were 14-6 in conference play, which is a record for most ACC wins. Unfortunately, they flamed out in the end and lost at home to Morehead State in the first round of the NIT at home. But the season kind of is really almost like three seasons or three sections of a season. And the first 12 games were, I won't say terrible, they were mediocre. So Clemson went 9-3. There's one sort of one-off ACC game in there. It was a big 20-point home win over Wake Forest, which was a pretty good win. It was actually part of a little 3-game stretch where they beat Penn State, a tournament team, in double overtime. That was at home. Then they beat Wake Forest at home, and they beat Towson, who's a solid, not a tournament team, but a pretty quality opponent. But the rest of non-conference play was pretty ugly. They lost to Iowa, which is really a fine loss. They were a 9 seed who lost to Auburn in the first round of the tournament, so not a terrible loss. But they lost to the 221st ranked team, according to KenPom, South Carolina, on the road. But to lose a rivalry match, and yes, it's not as important as winning in football, or some would even say not as important as winning in baseball. Some of the Clemson and South Carolina's best teams have lost against bad Clemson teams and against bad South Carolina teams. So it's not really a bellwether, but it's embarrassing and it hurts to lose to your opponent. And then when they're that bad, it's a stain on the year. So that was kind of put a damper to the start of the year. And then Loyola of Chicago in Atlanta in that hoops-giving neutral site game was a really bad loss. So they got out of non-conference play and were not in a great position. We didn't know how bad of a position they were in, really, because we didn't know how bad South Carolina and Loyola would really prove to be. But those, by the end of the year, were real anchors laying down their resume. Then they got really hot. And yes, they took advantage of not just a down ACC, but a extremely fortunate draw in the ACC scheduling. So they didn't have to play Duke twice. They didn't have to play Pittsburgh twice. They didn't have to play Miami twice. They didn't have to play Virginia twice or UNC twice. They won't get that lucky again for years and years. And during this stretch, it looked like they were really going to take advantage and could win an actual championship, an ACC regular season championship. So, I don't care if the ACC is down or you get lucky in scheduling. They win the championship, that's a spectacular season. And while I was never picking them, I always felt that Virginia, even though Miami ended up winning, I always felt Virginia would end up taking the regular season conference title. Clemson was showing promise here. During the stretch, they had wins over NC State, Duke, and Pitt. Those were 3 tournament teams. And by the end of the stretch, they were 18-4. They were 10-1 in the ACC. And they looked at least like a surefire tournament team, maybe not high seed, but it seemed like they would at least make the tournament, even if they slowed down. And slowed down is what KenPom and Haslametrics and the net all predicted that Clemson would do. They were extremely negative about Clemson, still having them ranked below a lot of teams they'd already beat. Memorably, they were below Virginia Tech even after they had beat them twice. And so they all basically, those are all predictive rankings. They were all predicting that Clemson would fall apart. And that's basically what Clemson did. So over the last sort of third-ish of the year, the last 12 games, they went 5-7. And even worse than the record is how they did it. So they picked up 2 more solid wins. They got wins over NC State in Raleigh and NC State in Greensboro, so largely a road game. So those were 2 really good wins. But same team, and they picked up 4 losses against non-tournament teams. They went on the road and got blasted by a not that good North Carolina team. They lost at Boston College. They lost to a horrible, probably one of the worst ever Louisville teams, or at least of the last few decades. Just a terrible Louisville team they lost to. And then even with all that, they still probably had a decent shot to make the tournament if they could beat Virginia in one of two tries. They lost to them in Charlottesville on at the end of February. They got a rematch in their second game of the ACC tournament, which came after a double bye and then beating NC State. Then they matched up with Virginia, lost that game, and that was kind of the last gasp of their hope. A lot of people felt they'd still make it, but that was really it. They did get a top seed in the NIT, and so you kind of wanted to see them try to prove the committee wrong, but they very quickly proved them right. They blew a fairly big lead, lost to Morehead State, a Morehead State team that KenPom ranks 237th in the nation. They played in a pretty weak conference, so they racked up a fair amount of wins, but not a great team. So really ended the season with a whimper. And if we look at the KenPom metrics, these are the rankings of the last handful of Clemson teams. You can see the section in orange is Coach Purnell's teams. Section of purple is Coach Purnell, and then it transitions to the section in orange, which is Coach Brad Brownell's teams. You can see this was actually not one of the better Clemson teams of really either coaching era. It's actually worse than all 6 of the tournament teams shown here. It's only the 9th best Brad Brownell team. And all of this is to really highlight just how down the ACC was and just how light and fortunate Clemson's ACC scheduling was. So kind of as I wrap up what I think of the season, it was one that at times was a lot of fun. But if I'm being objective, I don't think this was an especially good Clemson team. I think this was a Clemson team that at times took advantage of opportunities they were given against weaker competition, and that helps the record. But in reality, they probably didn't deserve to make the tournament. They really weren't a step above past Clemson teams, and I really just don't see them making a ton of progress. As you can see this chart, it's not trending up. And so I think we won't spend a ton of time on it in this video, but just a quick look ahead to the future. As we look ahead, we really need to see progress and growth. You can see from this chart, it's more up and down and stagnant. It's not trending, to the top right. So I think next season really has to be a step forward. Let's take a look at the players coming in and the players leaving. Hunter Tyson, Clemson's best player, phenomenal rebounder, great three-point shooter, and quality scorer inside the paint too. He's leaving. Braden Galloway, who was a one-year grad transfer, first at College of Charleston, but then from Boston College to Clemson. I was not high on him coming in. I thought he'd be a chucker. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you get the George Costanza reference. He was a volume shooter who shot at a low percentage at Boston College. And to some extent, that was the case at Clemson, but he did bring a lot of other, he brought leadership. He brought toughness on defense. He drove to the basket, made his own shots. I thought he was a good addition to the team and really surpassed my expectations. So losing him hurts more than I would have expected it to. And then Ben Middlebrooks, rising junior, probably didn't see an opportunity for him to start. PJ Hall declared for the NBA draft process, but will probably come back. I think Middlebrooks transferring is probably a sign of that likelihood that he returns, that Hall returns. I actually really liked Ben Middlebrooks. He was more of a bench contributor this season, but he brought a lot of toughness and defense and rebounding, and I thought it was developing nicely. So I actually think that's a big loss. Chauncey Gibson, he redshirted. It's really frustrating to lose him because you give him a scholarship, you pay for him to go to school for a year, and you use that scholarship slot. You only have so many, especially in basketball. You coach him up all year, and he contributes absolutely nothing to the program because he's redshirting. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say absolutely nothing. He probably helps in practice, but he doesn't even touch the court, and then he leaves after that. So that's really frustrating. So we lose those 4 players, 3 of them pretty notable contributors. Incoming, Jake Heidbreder is a pretty big impact transfer from Air Force, big-time scorer there, double digits both season. It was about 15 points last season, great three-point shooter. Could also drive to the basket. A little bit more three-point shot attempts than two-point shot attempts, but good offensive player overall. Love to see how his defense is. That'll probably determine if he's a starter immediately or if he comes off the bench or even redshirts. But I would think given his scoring in the Mountain West, he should have at least an opportunity to make a big impact. You think about the Mountain West, you think there's going to be adjustment to the ACC, but Air Force's schedule last year was just very slightly behind Clemson's schedule. Neither was very good in terms of overall strength of schedule ranking nationally. So it really shouldn't be a big adjustment. Air Force played San Diego State twice. They played Nevada, Utah State, Boise State. So they played plenty of tournament teams. So I don't think you'll necessarily see a big step back for him, at least related to ACC level competition. Asa Thomas is a incoming freshman. You don't usually see Clemson freshmen in the Brad Brownell era make an immediate impact. I think he's a quality recruit and all, but probably not an immediate impact. So look for Clemson. You see there's 2 additional slots there that are unfilled. Depending on when you watch this, there may be more transfers coming in. So I think you can expect that. So it probably won't be an overly anxious offseason, as I don't think there's a ton of reason to expect Clemson to take a huge jump next year. But we'll see what additional transfers come in. It could be a big splash that changes things. But just wanted to kind of put a bow on this season. Congratulations to UConn, who was absolutely dominant in the NCAA tournament. As is often the case, there's a lot of fun, exciting upsets, and FAU and all these kind of Cinderellas. But in the end, it was a powerhouse program, UConn, that won, as is often the case. You have all the Cinderella stories, but a true power and blue blood wins. I think UConn, you could say, is right there with Kentucky and UNC and Duke and UCLA, and all of them now is one of the best programs in the whole country. So congratulations to them. Kind of wrap the season there. And now please subscribe to this channel, as the next 6 months will probably be 95% plus football, pretty much Clemson football. We got some spring football episodes upcoming. So click subscribe. Definitely leave comments on this one. We'd really appreciate it, or I'd really appreciate it. And thanks for watching.